Hi, everyone. You're watching The Self Connection with Kelly Pietro and Ginny Brown, where we ask questions of a group of Ascended Masters known as the Multitude of the Greater Good.
Yes, Kelly asked the questions and I channel the answers, and you never know what's going to come up or how it's going to come up. So, yeah, that's pretty much it. Kelly asked and the multitude answers through me. Thanks for joining us. I hope you learn or get what you need from this recording.
All right, Ginny. So the theme for today is Divine Feminine versus Divine Masculine.
Oh, okay.
So I'm going to ask you, Ginny, if you're up for it, if you could channel a message first from the Divine Feminine.
Yeah, I was going to say, first of all, when you said that, what I got was, it's not a competition. They work well with each other, because you said versus.
I felt that too. That's so funny. When I said versus, I felt that and I was like, oh, but that's not what I meant. I meant,
Yeah,
and even as I try to find different words, I was almost said as opposed to, but that still makes it feel,
they work one in conjunction with the other.
yeah, okay. I already felt that coming through. That's so funny that you said that. I have no other words to substitute because none of them will do.
Yeah, just asking.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you to channel a message first from the Divine Feminine. So the question is, what would you like us to know about the Divine Feminine?
It is important to understand that there are many reasons we are called the Divine Feminine. However, in our estimation, it is not necessarily a separation of being. It's that part of oneself that knows, that part of oneself that cares, that part of oneself that feels who one is. It is called the Divine Feminine, as there is no other way of differentiating on the earth plane. However, it is the heartfelt self. It is that part of self that moves one forward. We can tell you there are many ways of perceiving Divine Feminine, but in our estimation, it is that part of you, that part of us that connects to allow oneself to move forward. It's like what I'm feeling is in the feeling self, in the heartfelt sense of self and being. We would highly recommend that you allow yourself to feel your feelings. And when it is that one feels one's feelings, one allows the Divine Feminine energy to step in and help. We are most pleased that you have asked. Thank you for including us in your dissertations of being.
Thank you for being here.
Definitely.
Okay, so now I'm trying to feel into, do I stay with the feminine and then go to the masculine, or do a flip-flop?
I don't think it matters.
You don't think it matters? Okay. Okay, so they kind of already answered this, but I'll ask it anyway. How can we as individuals begin to work with Divine Feminine energy more consciously in order to create balance in our lives?
It is a matter of feeling one's feelings and allowing oneself to know oneself. When one feels discontent, or the word is disconception, I think it's a misconception of that part of self that moves oneself forward, one cannot move. It is important to understand that there are many phases, many parts to the Divine Feminine, many parts to oneself. When one can connect with oneself on the physical plane and connect with oneself on the spiritual plane, allowing the energy to flow, allowing the heart feeling to differentiate which is which and when is when, one will be able to allow oneself to fully, it's like ensconce or bring forth that energy. It is important to understand energy is energy is energy. And when one allows oneself to be in the energy of love, one is allowing oneself to be in the energy of divine feminine countenance. Do not be concerned. When one is able to move forward in love of self, one is able to help oneself as well as another. When one is able to move forward in that part of self that says, hey, here I am on the earth plane and I am able to allow myself to be in my feeling self. I am allowing myself to understand there is more to me than that which meets the eye. And when I can say, hey, my heart is open to me. My heart is open to feeling. My heart is open to that part of me that says, this is what I know, this is what I need, and this is how I feel. One will be able to move oneself forward differently. In our estimation, it is right that you understand that there are many parts to oneself. There is the divine feminine, the divine masculine, that part that says, I'm on the earth plane, I know who I am. There is that part that says, I am in spirit, I know who I am. There are many more parts than many more parts than one is aware of. It is important to understand that when one moves forward from one area, one is able to expand in many areas. Do not be concerned. When the time is right, the time is right, and each one moves forward in their own sense of self and direction. Do not be concerned. When it is that each one is ready to move, each one moves. And when it is that each one is able to move forward in such a way as to allow oneself to feel one's feelings, allow oneself to understand what is right for that one will be able to allow one to understand what is right for the other. When one moves forward in a sense of knowing of self, one is able to expand oneself in many ways, some on the physical plane, some on the spiritual plane. It does not matter. Expansion is expansion, and all is love.
Awesome.
There you go.
A lot on the feeling self.
Yeah.
So I can't wait to see what they say about the masculine, but not yet. I have one more question for the divine feminine.
Okay.
How can we recognize the divine feminine in nature, or how is the divine feminine animated in nature?
It is important to understand it is not so much nature, it is the feeling within oneself. If one feels more of oneself while in nature, one is able to access those feelings of love and care. When one is able to allow oneself to feel one's feelings anywhere, one is able to feel the parts of self that are required in order to move oneself through the situation. It is not necessarily whether one is on the beach, in the woods, at home. It's a matter of feeling oneself, knowing oneself, and allowing the feelings to flow. Do not be concerned. All is love.
Interesting. Yeah. So, part of me was expecting to hear like my own interpretation of that or my own belief around that, which is like, I don't know. I don't know how to explain it because now I've already been re-educated. So to go back is hard.
I,
Um,
I personally think it has something to do with where you feel safe. If you feel safe, you can enjoy where you are no matter where it is.
yeah.
So
Yeah, I guess
you prefer the woods and the outdoor nature. I prefer either my home or on the beach. I love to be on the beach. So, I think it's where you feel the safest and most open to allowing yourself to be.
yeah, I think though, like as an herbalist, I was expecting to hear things like, oh, you will recognize the divine feminine in nature when you see X, Y, and Z pattern in a plant or XYZ pattern or behavior in an animal. But what the multitude just did was put it back on us. And they
Right.
always do that, right? It's we're here to experience,
Exactly.
period. And so it's how we experience. It doesn't mean that, Yeah, it comes back down to our own individual experience, and it is individual, which is very interesting. Okay, so now I think we'll get to experience potentially through the contrast when we ask these same questions of the divine masculine. So I would like to ask you, Ginny, to channel a message from the divine masculine. So I'm just going to give you a second to let that energy come in, feel the shift. And if you want to share anything about your experience, if there's a shift.
There is no shift. It's just ask the question.
Okay, interesting. So what would you like us to know about the divine masculine?
Okay. So in between, when you asked and I said there was no shift and your question, then I could feel the energy come in. It just comes in. It's just like normal for me.
Okay, so you couldn't, like, now that you've felt the difference between the divine feminine coming in and the divine masculine, is there anything you can explain about that shift or
Oh,
no?
I just feel it. And see, I channel from my crown. All my information comes in from my crown chakra. And so I could feel it in my head and around my crown area. Other than that, there's really nothing more. It's just feeling that energy come in.
Okay, so when you say feeling, it's like a sensate feeling, not an emotional feeling.
No, it's I could actually feel it in the crown of my head. I could feel the energy change.
You can feel movement, maybe.
A little bit of movement.
I guess that's like the only word I have for it, like a shift, a differentiation.
No, it's more like a little bit of a pressure, just a change in the pressure. There's no shift, there's no anything. It's just you might say stronger or weaker, although none of the energies are weaker, but that might be one way to explain the experience. It's just a little bit of a different energy as it comes in. I don't know.
Okay.
It's the hard part for me is it's kind of normal for me. So I don't know how to explain it because the energy is there with me and I get a little bit of different sensations sometimes when a different energy comes in. It's just a little bit of a sensation. It's nothing major. It's nothing dramatic. It's just normal for me.
Yeah, but I think it's really helpful for people to hear that
Yeah.
because I think when we, like, in more esoteric discussions, when people talk about it, it's like, and then I felt this shift. And they like dramatize it when like the true experience, while it was perhaps like very meaningful for them, and that's why they're expressing in this way, if you were to measure it, it's like a small blip. And I think that's helpful for people to know who might be trying to learn how to channel that. It's like, it's not always this like Broadway play going on.
Very subtle. It's just
Yeah.
a very subtle change.
But you're sensitive enough to notice the subtlety.
Right.
Which is interesting because as we go throughout our day, we could be having these subtle experiences, but we don't pay attention to them. Or, like, I know over time I've become more and more sensitive to subtleties, maybe because I'm more aware of them. And so I can speak to them a little bit more than if you were to ask me 10 years ago. I'd be like, I don't know what the heck you're talking about. But yet it was probably still happening, you know?
Yeah. Right.
Not in a channeling sense, but just in a sensing energy sense.
I think a lot of it has to do with awareness and opening up to it, allowing that information and that energy to flow. And it's just becoming more of aware of it as it happens. And then you say, oh, I just opened up to, well, you didn't just open up to, you just realized that you had opened up to. Very different.
Yeah, which is huge because I mean, the one thing I've learned about spending time with you in the multitude is that most of what we experience is just there. It's about us being aware and willing and allowing.
Allowing. Yeah.
And it because I think we can get this complex of like feeling special to oh, I opened up to this channel of like, well, anyone can do that, really, you know? And I say that because I think in this world of spirituality or mysticism or esoteric teachings, people can put teachers on a pedestal
Yeah.
as amazing and they can do this thing. And but yeah, so can you if you just work, like anyone can learn to play the piano if you practice hard enough.
Right.
So
Yeah. And
that's
also,
what.
I think you also, in that analogy, you also have to have an interest, because if you can practice for hours, but if you're not interested, you're not going to learn.
Yeah.
But if you have an interest in learning more and opening up to who you are, you will allow it to happen.
Yeah, and that interest can exist on the physical plane or on the spiritual plane where your soul wants to experience that and has an interest in experiencing that. And then therefore it might happen easier. Because on the physical plane, it can look like, why the heck am I experiencing this? I don't want this. And well, on some level, your soul might want it. you know.
Good point.
Okay.
That's a good point.
Yeah. I see that a lot actually. People coming in like fearful that they're having these metaphysical experiences and they feel victim to the experience, and sometimes just reframing it to re-empower them of, no, no, you are in charge, you're in charge, this isn't happening to you, this is happening for you, but
Right.
you can direct how this experience happens for you if you connect with yourself in spirit and create the boundaries and the circumstances with which you're willing to have this experience.
I think one good point to make also is that, yes, we are in charge. We are in charge on the earth plane. We are also in charge on the spiritual plane. And as you were saying, they may not want the experience, and you let them know they are in charge. Well, it may not be the physical part that's in charge. It's the spiritual part of them that's in charge and directing it. And all they need to do really is be open to the change and just allow it to happen.
Yeah. And in the allowing, find the peace and surrender and the self-empowerment to let go of victimhood. That's often what I see is like a victimhood of,
Yeah.
why me? It's like, no, no,
Sort
you're
of.
okay. You're okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
We got
I
away.
wonder now.
I don't
We
know what
got,
your question was now.
I'm going to ask it again. And now I'm really curious to see what they say. And if it's even relevant, maybe it is relevant to the question. So asking you, Ginny, to channel a message from the divine masculine now. What would you like us to know about the divine masculine?
It is important to understand that we are the ones who help you move through your daily life. We are the ones that allow you the opportunity to allow yourself the thinking messages, to allow yourself the ability to move through your thinking and allowing. Therefore, in our estimation, it is important to understand that when one comes to the earth plane, one allow both the divine masculine and the divine feminine, as we are the ones who help with the it's like the imagination, with the moving forward from the mind self, the ability to speak well of self, the ability to learn in a different way, the ability to use one's mind and mental facilities. It is important to understand that we are the ones that help you move forward on the earth plane in the earth processes of being. Do not be concerned. When it's time, we make our presence known. In other times, it is time for you to just move forward in that which you do know. When it is time to allow us to be seen, for instance, you will allow yourself to understand that we are a part of your being, We are not your whole total being. We are just there to help you move yourself forward. We would like you to understand it is how it is to be on the earth plane. One has that part of self that knows, that part of oneself that feels, that part of oneself that understands, that part of oneself that moves oneself forward differently. Do not be concerned. All is love.
Interesting. Okay, so the theme I got with that is more of like the thinking self, the mental aspect of being versus
Definitely.
the feminine is the feeling aspect of being.
Right. But what I know, what I've learned is that you need to have both. You need to have the physical, the feeling self, and the mental self working in conjunction, one in conjunction with the other. One
Yeah.
can't help you. Uh, um, they both help you, but one can't do it all, and the other can't do it all. You have to work them both together. And when the feeling self needs help, the mental self will come in and they will work one in conjunction with the other.
So it's really interesting to think about this, like from a healing standpoint, and just thinking back on my own personal experience. When I look at my patterns, let's say it's like suffering drops in, or I'm activated in a way to feel suffering. Oftentimes, I don't allow myself to fully feel that right away, and I go right to the mind to understand it.
Right.
Right? Like, I want to know the spiritual significance of this suffering and what am I supposed to learn from this, and the knowledge. I want the knowledge around this experience. And I think oftentimes it's a way of avoiding the feeling.
Yeah.
And I go into this mental process of like churning it over and over to the point where it exhausts me
Right.
into feeling it. And then my body will just, you know, once I know, well, and I probably don't even know all of it. Once I think I know all of the things about this experience, then I fully surrender and allow myself to feel it and cry. And there's and it's helpful to hear this. I have a follow-up question, but like, um it's good to know that they work together because I always am hard on myself about that process. Like,
Yeah.
why can't I just let myself feel it? Why do I have to think about it so much? And I get really hard on myself about my process. Um, but I'll say the process always results in healing. Like, and the more I do it, the more I go through suffering in this process, like I move through it so much quicker.
Yeah.
But it isn't until I feel it that I can move through it.
Right. Well, what I want to say is that that's your process. You don't
Yeah,
always have to get to that point to feel it, and you can feel it and release it. And then you can, maybe you feel it first, and then you have to go and allow your mind processes to work with it. I know that from my own experiences through life and my own like conversations with other people, that I've come, and people come into this earth um, lots of times with their heart open and a harder connection to their mind self, and others come in with their minds open and with a harder connection to the heart self. I personally have come in with an open heart. Therefore, it was really hard for me to get my heart and my mind working together. I still find it a bit of a challenge, but I am able to work through it. So it's not always that kind of process that you
yeah,
experience, that someone could experience that kind of healing, just on it's just different for them.
for sure. And I've kind of witnessed you, Ginny, in your process, and I'm like, gosh, I feel like you move through it even so much faster because you allow that the feeling sense, and
Yeah.
then the thinking is like easy. Like I don't know, it just feels like it
Well,
moves.
it gets healed. It gets healed on the feeling level. You have
Yeah,
to allow the feeling level, and then the healing is allowed to take place.
I totally believe that because that seems to be my experience. And again, even witnessing you like feel it, you tend to feel things first, and the healing seems so much faster in that way because it's healing isn't the feeling, it seems.
I got a lot of years to work through it too.
Yeah. Well, thanks for modeling it for me.
You're welcome. Happy to
so
do so.
so I know there's another way. If I could just get there. I'm entrained, I guess. Okay, so part of me wants to ask the same questions that I asked of the divine feminine just to keep it balanced,
Go ahead.
even though I feel like they kind of already covered it, but maybe there'll be something else. So how can we begin to walk with divine masculine energy more consciously in order to accomplish balance in our lives?
It is important to understand that one focus on who one is. It does not matter what another says or does. What matters is what one knows for oneself. Yes, there is the learning aspect, the book aspect. There is that part of oneself that wants to know more, more, and more. There is also that part of self that already knows, that part that is there for connecting to oneself in the spiritual. If one will allow oneself to know who one is first, then one is able to allow oneself to like digest or understand what another wants, needs, or knows. However, it is important that one understand one has knowing, one has understanding of their own, one has that part within oneself that is ready to move forward. However, if one discounts or disrespects oneself, if for one's knowing, one is unable to process. Therefore, it's important to understand that although the heart and the mind are in connection, it's a matter of allowing the heart to be what the heart is and the mind to be what the mind is, and allow the information to flow between the heart and the mind on the earth plane. It is also important to understand that as one moves forward in these aspects of being, that one knows that it is for one's own highest and greatest good, that the mind and the heart are working one in connection with the other. Do not be concerned. We would like you to understand there is a great deal of importance placed on the mind self. There is also a great deal of importance placed on the heart self. However, in our estimation, it is not so much what one is working. It is more that each one is working one in conjunction with the other. That is where the decisions can be made. That is where the knowing can be solidified. That is how it works, one in conjunction with the other. Thank you for asking.
Yeah, I even asked that like as a note. That was my next question. So that's interesting. They kind of already tackled that. But okay, so some of what I heard in that was we do know, but oftentimes, like let's say there's a situation, it's like we know how to move through that situation, but what often can happen is we put our own knowing aside, perhaps in favor of someone else's knowing. And that is where uh, that is an indication that our heart and mind are not working together. And that is like a disrespect of our own self
Yeah.
when we do that.
Mhm. Um, uh, I had an idea and it just flowed. So sorry.
All right, I'll come back if it needs to.
I'll come back.
And I think, a lot of times that's personally where my suffering can come in is when I feel that initial knowing of like, oh, well, I know I should say this, or I know my decisions should be this, or I know I should do that. But then I get caught up in how that might make someone else feel. And then putting my own knowing and my own feeling aside in favor of someone else's. What the multitude just kind of said was that's like a disrespect of self.
Right.
And I think that can be a challenge for people, especially people who come in with an open heart,
Right.
right? Because they can feel other people's um, resonances and, oh, well, if I make this decision, it's the right decision for me because I feel that in my heart to be true. But that's going to really irk another person. And okay, so how do I navigate that? And then you go into the thinking of,
Yeah. But I think a part of that is taking responsibility for yourself and then allowing the other person to take responsibility for themselves. When you
mm,
allow the other person to take responsibility for themselves, then it frees you up because it's not your responsibility to take care of them. Your responsibility is to notice who you are, what you need, what you want, what you feel. And then from that place, you can make a conscious decision as to how to help or move forward or whatever it is that's involved in the situation.
it's interesting. The topic that's coming to me as we're talking about this is being an empath. And I think that that term gets thrown around a lot as a scapegoat term to avoid, um, not always, by the way, not always, but oftentimes to avoid feeling your own truth. It's like, oh, I can't enter this situation because I'm an empath and I can feel everyone else's stuff and it's too overwhelming for me. So I can't go to that place. I can't enter that room. I can't be with those people. When
Okay.
really, I think what is happening in those situations is a total inability to respect your own truth and your own heart and your own mind in the face of feeling other people's discomfort with you honoring yourself.
Yeah, or the fear, or there's some other kind of fear that you think you can't enter that room, conversation, group of people, whatever it is.
Yeah, and it's probably a fear of you can't trust yourself to make the decision that honors yourself, to say the things that would honor yourself, to
Yeah, but I think it's for me, my experience has been more about what the other person's going to think, what the other person thinks of me, or
yeah, yeah,
that kind of fear can get in the way also.
for sure.
And I think it's far less conscious. I think it's just, a action or reaction to things.
Yes.
So
Yeah, it's like you can kind of like get trained into that unconscious
yeah.
reaction. But now that we're talking about it, there's awareness,
Right,
and whoever's watching might become a little bit more aware of their own discomforts in the face of potential judgment.
right.
And
Yeah.
then to be able to dig deeper into that and say, where's that coming from? That's interesting. Wow, I really do have that. Okay, so what is that?
Yeah.
And
So,
then you can go into the thinking, the masculine thinking mind,
right.
if you want to understand it all, or you can go in the feminine and just feel it. Allow the feeling to come in and wash over you and process through.
Yeah. And when you allow, I think for me, a lot of times when you go in and you allow the feeling part, for one, sometimes you don't need the thinking part. And for others, they allow themselves to work together. You don't have to consciously, oh, this is my feeling part, this is my thinking part.
Right.
No, they allow themselves to work together. So it becomes just a process.
Yeah, I thank you for saying that because like I can definitely, me, I like to understand things and dissect things. but the truth of the matter is, well, we might be on this path of hyper self-awareness.
Yeah.
There are humans on this earth experiencing the divine feminine, the divine masculine, their higher self, their ego self without any awareness, and they move forward in their own processes without being on a spiritual path.
Right.
And I think that's important to make mention, because I do, like, I've definitely been there where you get a little bit of what's the term? It's not coming to me. But you can get into your ego self of like, I'm more spiritual because I'm working on myself and I know all these concepts. It doesn't matter. Everyone here on this earth is having a spiritual journey, whether they're aware of it or not.
And a lot of people, what I've also learned through the multitude, of course, is that a lot of people are here to do the spiritual journey, but there are other people here to just experience, other people here just to learn. They're not necessarily here to take the spirituality route and to grow that way. Some are just here to be who they are and learn and experience things.
Yeah, and I think the important thing to remain humble is to know that one is not better than the other.
Exactly.
Just because you're on a spiritual path doesn't make you a more enlightened
Right.
or more wise or more higher ascended or these
Or better
terms.
than in any way.
Better
Right.
than in any way. It's just different. Like, to get out of that hierarchical mind. And I always see it like as a honeycomb, because it's like it all fits. It's all, we're all just on our own path. And I think the more we honor that in each other, um, the more peace we can find, instead of like rolling our eyes at another person like, oh, they're asleep. They're just not awake. They just don't. They're
Right.
at, the younger generation uses a term called, it's NPC, or NP, non-player character. It's a video game term. It's like when you're playing and you're the main character going around, right? But then you see this one character and he's just like says the same thing over and over again,
Yeah.
but he's not doing anything. Non-player character. They'll use that term for people who are like non-spiritual or non-awake or something. And I just think it's like a disregard of another being. So
Yeah,
like, just to remember that we're all like on
I,
our own path.
I think that has a lot to do with acceptance. It's acceptance of who you are, of course. You're on your path, you're accepting that. However, it's important to accept the other person too, wherever they are. They're on their path, they're not, and their path may be very different from yours. Their path may be just here to experience the earth plane. That may be all, but it's acceptance of yourself and acceptance of another wherever they are.
Yeah. And I'm sure, Ginny, you get this a lot. Like, I get a lot of parents who experience, come here and have a great experience. I want my kid to come here because they want to fix their kid. And I'm like, okay, but they have to want to, it can't be a forced thing, because this might not be part of their path,
Or they may not be ready for it.
yeah.
Ready. Yeah. So did you have any other questions for the divine masculine before for today?
Well, I think that the question about how it's animated in nature, they kind of cover that with the feminine, so I don't think we need to ask that. But I do have one more question
Okay.
for, I guess, both. So that should be interesting. Let me see if I can formulate this question. The original one I wrote down, they already answered, so I want to reframe it. Okay, is there anything else that they would like us to know about how they work together within each of us as individuals and in the collective?
It is important to understand that each one on the earth plane is comprised of many things, one being the divine feminine attributes, one being the divine masculine attributes, and one's own knowing from having lived within oneself for many lifetimes of being. There are times when those experiences have created a knowing within a person that one is unable to accept. One able to say, oh, this is the only lifetime I've ever lived, and this is the one where I am going to move forward in such and such a direction. We can tell you, in our estimation, each one has lived many lifetimes in many different places and learned many interesting things. And all of those things are encompassed within that person's being, whether it be on the physical or the spiritual level. We can tell you we are consciously a part of each of that knowing, each of that feeling, and each of that allowing. And when it is that we move forward in our own rights of understanding and allowing, we expand ourselves. Therefore, we are able to help each and every other one expand themselves in their feeling, in their heart self, in their knowing, in their allowing, and in their being. Do not be concerned, all is love.
That was like a slower cadence than normal, Ginny. Did you notice that?
No, well, no, it's both of them.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just hard to get the information to process. Sometimes it's hard to say the words because sometimes they come quickly and sometimes they come in another one, this, that one. So it's hard sometimes to just say the words. So it's not always them. Sometimes it's the translation. I don't know. That may have been a little bit slower. Yeah.
Well, I think it's interesting that they bring up, I don't know if you are even remembering now what you just channeled, but they're bringing up past lives a little bit.
Oh yeah, I know what I said.
Yeah. And I thought, I was like, oh, this is interesting that they're talking about that. Why are they talking about that? But they talked about the knowing and the feeling self, be it in the physical or the spiritual. And so what came to mind for me is, okay, I don't even know what I want to say because I got a lot coming in, but it's like we can come into a lifetime, an incarnation with physical attributes because they talked about physical that, and they talked about physical and emotional as it pertains to past lives. Like
Yeah.
I think I have a scar, right? I have a scar, and my husband has a scar, and my son they have the same scar, and I find that interesting. And I always, you think about people with scars or injuries or physical maladies that potentially, you hear people in past life regressions make those connections of their current life physical malady with an experience that happened in a past life.
All
Have
right.
you read any of these books about it? It's really interesting. So, and what you just channeled was like, we have the knowing of past lives and we have the feeling of past lives, be it in physical or in spirit. And so that's kind of what came to me, is that we are experiencing this life right now. And you have the ability to know and feel where experiences in this life are connected to past lives. And sometimes that is interesting or healing to acknowledge where those connections may exist.
We have the knowledge, all that we have learned in those past lives. And we can't bring it all with us. There's not enough of us on the earth plane to bring all that information. So it's all there. So yes, there is the knowing, there is that knowledge. I guess that's all I wanted to add to that.
Yeah, like if you do a reading for someone and someone's like, well, is there a past life connection to my neck pain? You can, on their behalf, go into their Akashic records and retrieve, no, there's no connection. That's just this life. Or, yeah, no, you fell off a horse and I
Yeah,
don't know.
but this group is on the higher levels, and all of that is not important. You know, they'll ask about the connection with that, and it will be more on the feeling connection of that
Yes.
and the healing of the feeling, rather than, oh, this happened or that happened, or, you know, like you fell off a horse. That is not
Right.
important to this group. You know,
When
that
you say this group, you're talking about the multitude.
multitude, the divine feminine, the divine masculine, on the level that I channel them.
Yeah.
Else may be able to tap in differently,
Yeah.
but I channel on the higher realms, the very higher realms, where it's the the individual experiences, like falling off a horse, is not important.
Mhm.
How you felt when you fell off that horse may be important.
Yeah. Yeah.
Those types of things. So it's very
Interesting.
different what I do.
But would you say, or would they say that when someone is able to tap into the knowledge of the past life, for example, the who, the what, the when, the information, that that would be an aspect of tapping into the divine masculine of the soul, versus if they were to tap into the feeling of an instance of a situation from a past life, that would be tapping into the divine feminine of that soul?
It is important to remember that each one has the capacity and the ability to feel both simultaneously. It does not matter. The goal is to work with both simultaneously, the feeling and the heart self. And I mean, the feeling and the mind self. And when one is able to allow oneself the ability to ask for information about a past life experience, one will come from, more often than not, both simultaneously. However, the it's like the pinpoint information, you know, falling off
Yeah.
a horse isn't important. The knowledge is there, the allowance is there, and when the time is right, the information flows however it flows.
I can relate to that because my experience has been, let's say I can, um, usually it's clairvoyance where I can see the past life instance if it's important, right? It'll be shown to me. And then as I'm describing it, it's almost like the client, and I don't really do this anymore because I've learned that you don't have to know, you just have to feel, right? And you just have to be willing to surrender and allow the healing. All the details don't matter, but let's just say earlier in my practice, when I would tap into a past life energy, right? So the client will come in with an intention. I'm looking to heal X, Y, and Z. And my method in the past at that time was like very directed. Honestly, I think is very limiting looking back on it, but nonetheless, um, I would ask like, okay, is there a past life energy related to that's keeping this person from experiencing healing from this issue? And I would be shown like a movie of the past life. Yeah, it feels like you're in Scotland and there was food scarcity, whatever it was, right? Whatever I saw, I would explain it. And as I'm explaining it, it was like part of them, the part of them that remembered that also connected to the part of themselves that felt it. And they would be overwhelmed with emotion, with tears, just by me
Okay.
helping them to connect to that remembrance. And then there was healing as a result of that. Like, which I always found like really fascinating. But to what the multitude just shared, it was in conjunction. It was the knowing and the feeling that happened at the same time that created a situation that allowed that person to, on the soul level, it felt, step into healing.
Yeah. So, and what I've learned is tears like that are always healing. They're very important. And when you start to have the tears fall like that, just let it go. Let them come and allow the healing to happen. So
Yeah. It can catch someone off guard though when they're like, I don't know why I'm crying. This doesn't even make sense. It's like, no, it's your soul is kind of like acknowledging the energy so that it can be healed.
yeah.
It's
Perfect.
interesting.
Well, we covered a lot today, Kelly.
We did, and we covered a little bit about your process, which I love hearing about. And I think our audience probably enjoys that too. And
Oh, I hope so.
yeah, this was cool. I like
Okay,
it.
good.
Thanks, Ginny. Thanks to the multitude, and thanks to our audience for tuning in.
Thank you, Kelly. I appreciate your questions.
Yeah.
And thank you, everyone, for watching and listening. And as I said before, I hope this information is helpful to you. And, Kelly and I are here and available at times. So we'll just keep on going. So
Thanks.
thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.